Now, Elizabeth Warren is out with a new plan, and it's actually not very good. So, look, a lot of the times when Elizabeth Warren releases a new plan, it seems to be fairly okay. It's more of like a watered down version of something that Bernie Sanders would put out, at least when it comes to healthcare and student loan forgiveness. But generally, it's a better plan than most other candidates have put out. In this case, Elizabeth Warren's plan to police online speech is actually really terrible. Now, CNBC is reporting that on Wednesday, Elizabeth Warren released her plan to fight disinformation and to hold tech companies more accountable for their actions in light of the 2016 election. So this is directly in response to RussiaGate. Okay, so now she says that disinformation and online foreign interference erode our democracy, and Donald Trump has invited both. Now, is that true? Uh, Look, of course, yes, Donald Trump has openly called for other countries to investigate his political opponents. For example, he told Russia, go and find Hillary Clinton's missing 30,000 emails, right? He has invited foreign interference and has also called for, and is currently getting impeached for, trying to call for Ukraine to do an investigation of Joe Biden, but not really an investigation, but actually make more of an announcement so that he can mess with the news cycle, which is what happened last time when James Comey of the FBI had announced that Hillary Clinton was under investigation over the emails. And so you can see where he's going for on this one, and you can see what Elizabeth Warren is going for. Nonetheless, Warren said that she plans to, let me get the rest of her quote actually. Anyone who seeks to challenge and defeat Donald Trump in the 2020 election must be fully prepared to take this on, and I've got a plan to do it. And that plan is not having better policy positions or being a stronger candidate. It apparently means trying to police the internet. So now she proposed to combat disinformation by holding tech companies accountable, like Facebook, Twitter, responsible for spreading misinformation designed to suppress voters from turning out. So basically saying, "Oh, this X candidate is terrible," whether it be, "Oh, look at how terrible Joe Biden is. You shouldn't go out to vote." Well, now wait a minute. That's like your opinion, and you should be able to be protected online if you post your opinion on Facebook. But she's saying, well, no, that's if the Russians decide to go on Facebook and buy some ads or something. Well, Facebook, I believe, has already banned those political ads. Um, and so I think either Facebook or Twitter has banned those types of political ads. And so she has called for the government and the tech industry, as well as individual political campaigns, to go and combat these efforts to spread disinformation. She said that I will push for new laws and impose tough civil and criminal penalties for knowingly disseminating this kind of information, which has the explicit purpose of undermining the basic right to vote. So, look, there's an issue here with fake news. Of course, bad faith actors put out all sorts of propaganda. Now, I agree with that. I don't agree that you fix that by banning speech or by criminalizing companies for hosting false information. The problem here extends to, look, I understand the idea behind this. And generally, it's like, oh, okay, you want to go after people that are bad faith actors. Sure, I understand that. The problem here is the law of unintended consequences. So who's going to decide that what they put out is false? I mean, what a user puts out is false. You're going to leave it to Facebook to fact check that, or you're going to leave that to the government deciding what's true and what's false, basically setting up a ministry of truth. That's the stuff that I'm concerned about. Okay. Now, look, some of the fake stuff is pretty easy to spot, by the way. Like, for example, Republicans have been caught putting out fake election dates. That Republicans have literally mailed out fake election dates to people, right? So Republicans have been caught doing this already. Now, companies like Facebook have already banned that kind of stuff in their terms of service, and that's fine, right? Um, it's fine if the company decides to do it. It's not fine if you're going to have the government, being able to basically label something fake news or not, and then put criminal penalties on people and companies who spread what they have now deemed fake news around. You might as well criminalize the entire internet for spreading misinformation. So now the problem with this is that you might think, well, look, under Warren, we're going to go after the bad actors. We're going to go after the Russians and the Ukrainians for trying to meddle in our elections. But what happens? Oh, and we're going to use the government to put out civil penalties, right? And decide what's fake news. The problem is you always have to do, well, okay, what if a similar piece of legislation gets passed under a Trump administration? So now you've got Donald Trump deciding what's fake news or not. And then, since he already does that, by the way, he's, oh, New York Times fake news. Well, then he decides, you know what I'm going to do to the New York Times? I'm going to start jailing them. I'm going to start jailing people on Facebook for spreading misinformation. And I won't do that because he's met with Mark Zuckerberg quite a bit. But what the effect would be is that you would chill people from putting that stuff that he might deem fake news on Facebook. Facebook would scrub everything that is against the establishment, that is against the government, or that particular politician at the time. And so that's a big problem for me. Okay. Again, you might as well criminalize the entire internet. And this is what it seems to be. So, and again, what's going to be impacted the most are things that make the government uncomfortable, things that make politicians uncomfortable. And so this is the problem, right? And I don't want corporations to be the gatekeepers of what is information, especially when these very companies themselves have lied to the American people. ExxonMobil, for example, they've lied about climate change, right? The New York Times constantly lies against Bernie Sanders. Are we going to criminalize them for it? Where does it end? So, look, the only way to combat misinformation is not with the government cracking down or giving corporations or holding the corporations accountable for stuff that users post, right? No, you fight misinformation with the truth. So here's what I think is going on. These companies, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're getting blamed for the loss of Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump for the Russian interference, the Russiagate stuff. Now, was there interference by the Russians? Of course. Russian memes, social media posts, fake stories, ads, all that stuff. Did it have a gigantic impact on the elections? I don't think so. I don't believe so. Okay. Hillary Clinton was an unpopular candidate for many valid reasons, but I do understand that there was a lot of lies about her as well. And that, there's a lot of fake stories. There's tons of stories against her that, again, weren't true. Some of the most vicious and vile things. But then there's also a lot of stories that were reported that were true. For example, all the stuff that was reported in the emails. Okay. But that's part of politics. And we get that. And yet the establishment seems that it wants to punish these companies anyway, to look for a scapegoat. And they want to prevent anybody on these platforms that reach millions of people for doing anything like that again, even if it means actually hurting journalism on those platforms too, which I do believe is going to be the first casualty. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act states that providers and users of an interactive computer service will not be treated as the publisher of any information provided by another information content provider. Basically, that section allows us to post whatever we want within reason online, barring, of course, physical threats and things like that. We can post that online on Facebook, for example, without Facebook being held liable for that. Okay. And so if you allow the government to criminalize Facebook for you putting up a post that maybe was fake or inappropriate or disinformation or whatever, well, if you start criminalizing Facebook for that, they're going to scrub everything, and it's going to chill what things maybe later on are true but are uncomfortable for the government and or Facebook. So that's a problem here. That's what I see. Okay. If we start poking holes in that, we're really going to lose what makes the internet great in the first place: the democratization of information and public opinion. Now, I don't want to rely on government or corporate sources for news and information. I'm sure you don't want to either. Um, okay, so now here's the thing: the government's already begun to Swiss cheese this Section 230. So this is why I was against SESTA and FOSTA. Now, SESTA and FOSTA was set up and passed. Even Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they both voted for it. Those are votes that I disagreed with. They said that it was supposed to combat trafficking, right? Sex trafficking. The problem is that it actually hurt sex workers since it made online platforms legally liable for conversations about sex work. It basically destroyed any tools sex workers use to keep themselves safe. So they can no longer have those discussions, right? If you allow that kind of legislation that Elizabeth Warren is putting forward to weaken Section 230 in regards to news and politics, then if you post something against a politician, well, maybe that politician decides they want to threaten YouTube, or then YouTube might remove your video or remove your, channel altogether. That's chilling, and that's not at all good for independent news. I don't like this at all because I see that the possible slippery slope downhill that this could happen. Already, I think YouTube's gone too far against independent creators, independent news, by driving old traffic towards what they call authoritative sources, places like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. Those very networks are for-profit corporations, and they themselves have pushed misinformation on behalf of politicians. Remember, the Iraq War? Every media outlet beat the war drums and posted fake government sources that claimed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Those were lies, absolute lies. They tried to do that with Iran. They get elevated, those news sources, on YouTube. They get elevated on Facebook. Why? Because, we got to fight disinformation. We got to fight fake news. So we're going to go and trust the authoritative sources, CNN, New York Times, MSNBC, The Guardian, all these different, again, mainstream sources. We're going to trust them, even though they've gotten it wrong so often and have put out their own misinformation that often protects the establishment, that often protects politicians and government sources themselves. So that's a big problem. You can see why the elimination of independent news through targeting them with supposed you're pushing disinformation laws, is hugely problematic. And that's how, unfortunately, Warren's bill could lead to bad things in the name of combating fake news. So you're literally taking something that, yes, has it's the whole road to hell is paved with good intentions. This has good intentions to combat misinformation, but the execution of it, it seems like it can be just abused. And this is a big problem, right? We need other solutions that do not destroy free speech or give corporations and the government too much power over the internet. If we do, I think and I'm afraid that's going to spell the end of the internet and freedom of information with it. So I deeply oppose this bill, and I hope that Elizabeth Warren goes back and thinks and says, wait a minute, maybe we need to try another way. Because this, as it is, not good. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.